Dear viewers, please support us by subscribing to our channel, hitting the like button, and sharing this video with others. Your support means the world to us. The cities of hell have opened up. How can you tell a human from the living dead? Are you resurrected? In the series Resurrection, no way. We have a superpowered resurrection here. Steals children and throws medical staff off the wall. Ready for a holy war? You can become a real fighter at any age. Some are destined to start fighting for their lives from the very first days. But sometimes fate can offer such challenges that are simply impossible to cope with. Hannah Wesh was born on January 11, 2015, in the small town of Hanover, Ohio, USA, with a population of about 1,000 people. Her life path was not easy from the very beginning. Because her mother was addicted to heavy illegal substances, suffered from drug withdrawal syndrome, and a number of medical conditions, the girl was born significantly prematurely. She would not have been able to survive on her own, so she remained in the hospital, where doctors were faced with a whole range of complications. Hannah spent 92 days in an incubator. She couldn't even breathe and was connected to a life support machine. The girl had a high risk of infection, breathing problems, and all this was only aggravated by hepatitis C, which she got from her mother. The prognosis was disappointing, but the little girl miraculously pulled through. However, the difficulties were just beginning. A few months after being discharged from the hospital, the mother was arrested for distributing illegal drugs and was deprived of parental rights. The child was given to the biological father named Jason. The young man already had 2 children from a previous relationship, whom he was trying to raise. He faced unemployment, having recently been laid off. Jason had been a single father for 2 years, trying his best to survive on benefits and find stable work. However, it was not possible to ensure stability for long. The man got by with occasional earnings. Relatives helped him, but it turned out to be difficult to rise from the very bottom. When he missed several payments on rent, housing difficulties arose. Jason was forced to sleep and live in a car. During this difficult period, he handed over the children to his older brother so that they could at least sleep in the apartment. Only by mid-2017 did the financial situation stabilize. Jason got a job as a builder at a local company, got a job with a good salary. However, this meant that he worked 12 hours a day, so he could not devote enough time to the younger generation. Someone had to look after the children, and he began to think about it. Jason rented a house from his boss. They lived on the same street. It seemed that life was getting better. Quite quickly, the hero of the story met 35-year-old Lindsay Parton, who was the wife of one of his colleagues and had 2 children. He was immediately told about her, as Jason needed a nanny for his 3-year-old daughter. The woman had set up a small daycare at home, having converted the family's garage for this purpose. She agreed to look after Hannah while her dad was at work. The woman took a symbolic fee of about $30 a day for this. The man was forced to work a lot, 12 hours a day at the construction site. He often brought his youngest daughter to the nanny at 6 a.m. Lindsay did not refuse. She understood Jason's situation, even helped to wash Hannah's clothes. More than 6 months passed in this mode. Lindsay was pregnant, but lost the child. Despite this blow of fate, the woman decided to continue her activities. By the spring of 2018, the father began to notice that Hannah was increasingly returning from this kindergarten with bruises and abrasions. Lindsay attributed all this to the child's hyperactivity. The girl attended kindergarten for 8 months. Since February, Jason noticed that the bruises on the child's body were getting bigger and appearing more often. Each time, Lindsay explained this by accidents, Hannah playing with other children, falls, and the girl's activity. The child herself was still too young. The 3-year-old girl could not say anything and simply confirmed the teacher's words. During this period, Jason accumulated a small debt for Lindsay's services. He did not always manage to pay her on time. However, the woman treated this with understanding. The man gradually paid off the debt, but periodic delays recurred. The daughter continued to get bruises, and in rather unusual places, for example, behind the ear or near the collarbone. Hannah began to complain of headaches, said that she did not want to go to Lindsay, and began to resist. The teacher continued to tell with a carefree smile that the child either fell or collided with other girls while walking. Jason was worried about his daughter, constantly communicating with the nanny via text messages about the issue. When he picked up Hannah in early March 2018, the child looked beaten up. There were scars on her chin and quite large bruises on her chest. On March 8th, Jason woke up early to go to work. Before his shift, he had to take Hannah to Lindsay's. He dropped his daughter off at 6:51 a.m. and dropped her off at a makeshift daycare center, set up in the garage of his home. The girl did not want to let her father go, asked him to kiss her goodbye several times, squeezed him as if he did not want to let go. Jason was touched, but he could not do anything. He had to go to work, and so he left. There were only 5 minutes left before the start of the shift. The man had to make it to work. He exchanged a short greeting with Lindsay and promised to pick up the baby in the evening. 5 minutes later, the teacher called Jason, but he did not hear the phone. Already in the workshop, the man noticed the missed call and called back. The nanny, as if choking with fear, asked him to return immediately for Hannah, as the girl had fainted. According to the woman, she did not understand what had happened. The father rushed to the nanny's house. He quickly reached the place, ran into the playroom, found his daughter unconscious with a bruise under her eye. While the man was getting there, Lindsay called 911 at 7:13 a.m. She explained that the child had fallen down the stairs and was injured, and began to consider various versions. The teacher believed that the girl could have had a brain hemorrhage or a concussion, since she had lost consciousness and was injured, and began to consider various versions. The teacher believed that the girl could have had a brain hemorrhage or a concussion, since she had lost consciousness and was breathing poorly. According to the nanny, Hannah had been feeling unwell the day before. She thought it might all be connected. Paramedics arrived at the address within minutes. Hannah's condition was grave. She did not regain consciousness, did not respond to anything. Her breathing was intermittent and very difficult. According to doctors, the child began to bleed internally due to the fall. The doctors immediately had many questions. After unbuttoning the baby's shirt, they saw numerous injuries and bruises at various stages of healing. They covered her chest, arms, legs, and even her head. Hannah even had a blood vessel rupture in one of her eyes, causing it to fill with blood. The 3-year-old victim was rushed to the nearest emergency room, located in Hanover. Jason was terrified. He tried to get into the ambulance to be with his daughter, but they wouldn't let him in. Police officers arrived and spoke to Lindsay. Now she has revealed new details. The nanny claimed that Hannah came in and undressed, then asked for a donut. When she got the treat, she simply fell off the couch head first. Already at this stage, discrepancies with her testimony, voiced to the operator of the emergency service and the arriving police officer, were noticeable. In addition, the police were interested in the fact that Lindsay Parton illegally organized a kindergarten in her garage, while not having a license, not even specialized education to provide such services. Previously, the woman worked as an accountant for her father and distributed Mary Kay cosmetics. According to her, the job as a teacher was just a way to earn some extra money. Doctors found a subdural hematoma and a whole range of life-threatening injuries, which also did not match Lindsay's description. The doctor knew that such problems rarely occur over several days and due to an accidental fall. They usually indicate some intense and sudden event that has resulted in a traumatic brain injury. Of course, they were not rushing to make loud statements, but they were talking about something alarming.
Lindsay continued to insist that more than 24 hours ago, the child had hit his head hard during a fall from a toy train, back on March 6th, the first call from the nanny.
Hannah was taken to the nearest emergency room. While still in the car, doctors found multiple injuries consistent with regular beatings. All this ended with a severe subdural hematoma, which could have taken the child's life.
Unfortunately, the hospital did not have the necessary equipment to take pictures and assess the situation. It was decided to transport the girl by air to the nearest department that had everything necessary. It was in Cincinnati. Doctors didn't need proof that the child had been abused for a long time. The bruises that covered almost her entire body proved it. They were in various stages of healing. Jason immediately rushed to the hospital in his car, where the child was taken by helicopter. By this time, 35-year-old Lindsay had been detained for preliminary questioning. The woman continued to insist that the injury was an accident. She constantly stated that she and her husband had a negative attitude towards physical violence as a method of education. At this stage, the possibility of abuse against Hannah was considered. The first suspect was the girl's father, Jason. However, already at the stage of communication with Lindsay, inconsistencies in her words began to appear. She changed her testimony several times, describing how the girl either fell somewhere or collided with furniture. It seemed strange that ordinary childhood activity led to such serious bodily injuries as the child's father described. The donut story was forgotten. Now the teacher insisted that Hannah had been unhappy since she arrived at the kindergarten that morning, had been screaming and behaving inappropriately. During her conversation with the social worker, the woman changed everything again. Now she said that the girl started to climb the stairs, tripped, and hit her head several times as she fell. The woman's story changed every time she talked to someone about it. At the Cincinnati Medical Center, doctors desperately fought for the girl's life, trying to reduce intracranial pressure and avoid brain damage, but the child's condition remained serious. Local residents raised more than $10,000 to support the baby and pay for her treatment. At this time, Jason's father was in despair and crying in the hospital. He also spoke with the detective and the clinic staff, but the prognosis was disappointing. The man realized with horror that all the bruises and abrasions on his daughter were not accidental. He denied that he was prone to abuse. Despite a long period of decline, Jason had no criminal record, so his words rang true. However, Lindsay also had no previous problems with the law. Thanks to the operation to remove part of the skull, neurosurgeons managed to stop the increase in intracranial pressure. After that, the child was placed in a medically induced coma. The next day, Lindsay was taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. She continued to give conflicting stories about what happened, which kept changing. The daycare could have been a torture chamber where the child was being abused. After an hour and a half of questioning, the woman was released pending clarification. She wanted to see Hannah, but was denied access. Then the nanny talked to Jason. The father assumed that his daughter had an aneurysm. The very next day, Lindsay was called back to the sheriff's office. The teacher spoke with new detectives, who immediately made it clear that she was a suspect in the crime. After this interrogation, investigators were confident that they had a prime suspect in the child abuse. The woman's cell phone was checked. It turned out that Lindsay had been making disturbing searches on the internet as early as March 6th. She was looking for a way to speed up the healing of bruises. The most suspicious thing is that the search history was deleted, but it was restored. A week after these events, doctors contacted Jason and informed him that his daughter was brain dead. On March 18th, Hannah was taken off life support and pronounced dead. The autopsy report listed the cause of death as traumatic brain injury. The case was classified as a homicide. The girl's funeral took place on March 22nd. Her older sister Caitlin posted a series of photos with the baby and thanked everyone who cared for their support. The sister could not believe that Hannah was no longer alive. The report of all the injuries found on the girl took up 2 whole pages, most of which was a list of injuries. Now Lindsay was charged with murder. The main suspect insisted on her innocence. She was able to return home. The alleged perpetrator went to her parents to await trial, having posted a $75,000 bond. On April 3, 2019, Lindsay Parton and the family of the deceased Hannah Wesh sat in the courtroom. It is curious that the defendant husband immediately refused to testify at the trial and give evidence against his wife. However, they immediately broke up and did not communicate anymore. The nanny insisted that she did not harm the child. According to the defense, on March 8, 2018, Jason brought his daughter to the teacher's home, tightly wrapped in clothes. A hood was pulled over her head, which could have hidden injuries. The man quickly left the garage. Just 30 seconds later, Lindsay watched as the girl fell off the couch and lost consciousness. According to her, 2 days before, on March 6, 2018, Hannah was playing outside with other children and riding a toy train. During this, she fell hard and hit her head. When Jason picked up his daughter, Lindsay described the incident in detail and recommended that she go to the hospital. However, the man did not do so. The lawyer insisted that the father's indifference was the cause of complications from the head injury. Numerous witnesses described the severity of the injuries to the 3-year-old girl, who could not possibly have sustained all of those bruises in one day. They were in various stages of healing, suggesting regular beatings. Jason was described as a model father. He never used physical force against his children and was a decent person. The lawyer insisted that sometime after the girl's death, a report was made, indicating that Jason was shaking Hannah when the ambulance arrived at the scene. According to the defense, this could have caused serious injuries, aggravated the situation, and led to complications. Experts agreed that the head injury and the resulting swelling could not have been caused by shaking. It was a blow to the head with a blunt object, and very strong. Hannah even had a broken eye socket. Jason did not deny that he really tried to bring the child to his senses, shaking, but not too hard. According to him, he was terrified, but every time he called his daughter by name, he tried to lift the girl. The breathing became deeper. It seemed that Hannah was coming to her senses. The man simply desperately wanted to save her life. A doctor from the Children's Hospital in Cincinnati, where doctors fought for Hannah's life, spoke up. According to the expert, the blow received by the child was so strong that it displaced the central line of the brain. If the child had really received such a serious injury several days before hospitalization, she would not have been able to speak or even move properly during this time. According to the doctor, it was during this period, while the father went to work and the girl was left with the nanny, that something violent happened, which caused the intense hemorrhage. The doctor also dismissed the idea that such injuries could be caused by simple shaking. After these statements, Lindsay's lawyer began to behave somewhat aggressively. This seemed questionable in light of his client's situation, even counterproductive. The woman seemed calm, even during the most tense moments of the hearing. Lindsay showed no emotion, only occasionally casting sharp glances at her lawyer. It seemed that even the defendant did not appreciate this approach to the case. However, both stories sounded convincing. The defense tried to raise doubts in the jury. The prosecution focused on the constant changes in Lindsay's story, which she tried to adjust to the situation, smooth over uncomfortable questions, to reduce the degree of her responsibility, and even justify herself. The interrogation tapes were shown. When the detectives left the office, the woman was left alone, but with a working camera, which she did not know about.
She said out loud that for this she would go to prison for the rest of her life.
The prosecution insisted that this was some kind of veiled confession. The nanny knew she had done something that could get her life in prison. Right during the hearing, Lindsay changed her story again. Now she told how she tripped over a blanket that Hannah had thrown on the floor. This caused her to fall on the baby. Under cross-examination, detectives were able to coerce Lindsay into admitting that she could have harmed the baby because Jason had given her permission to use physical force for discipline purposes. He himself denied it. The pressure on the defendant continued. She began to reveal unpleasant details of her educational process. According to the teacher, when Hannah came to the kindergarten that day, she immediately took ketchup, then asked to go to the toilet. The nanny followed the child and saw the girl pour ketchup into the toilet. She experienced great anger and struck the girl in the jaw from the bottom up with a fist, described as a boxing uppercut. Lindsay then grabbed the girl and began shaking her violently. The woman began to reveal increasingly disturbing details of her activities in the garage. She admitted that the bruises on the girl's chest were caused by her aggressively pushing her when Hannah became hysterical and tearful. Her disciplinary action did not end there. The woman admitted to the blow, but tried to smooth over the unpleasant moments. The defendant said that she immediately became attached to the girl, who came to her kindergarten in wrinkled and dirty clothes, so she had to wash them. After meeting Hannah, Lindsay posted her photo on her social media page with the caption, "Welcome, sweet Hannah." The teacher justified herself by saying that she treated the girl like her own daughter and considered her a member of her family. Experts and prosecutors were sure that the beating of the 3-year-old girl did not end there that day. Judging by the severity of the injury, it was a blow with a bat or something similar. However, no murder weapons were found during the search. Presumably, the nanny could have picked up the girl and slammed her hard on the floor. This explained the child's severe injury and the broken eye socket with hemorrhage in the eye. When Jason was called, he gave a detailed account of the chronology of his daughter's injuries and showed her correspondence with Lindsay, where she made excuses. She came up with different stories each time. Jason remembered very well what his daughter looked like before he dropped her off at daycare for the last time. When he arrived back 8 minutes later, he was shocked by the girl's condition. Hannah had a multitude of new bruises and abrasions, mostly on her head and face. The man also recalled that the girl had been complaining of headaches for the past 3 weeks. Later, a forensic expert found numerous abrasions on her head that were simply not visible because of her hair. A lawyer was still trying to smooth over her guilt. It became known that Hannah had been infected with hepatitis C since birth. The mother, who suffered from addiction, had a similar diagnosis. Against this background, the slightest blow or scratch could turn into a rather large bruise. A defense attorney tried to portray the girl's father, Jason, as a marginal figure who neglected the child. However, this did not justify the nanny who regularly beat Hannah. The statement of the victim's grandfather, with whom the child spent every Sunday, sounded alarming. According to the man, she once admitted that the nanny was hurting her. Lindsay once again began to improvise and claimed that all her confessions during the interrogation were lies because she wanted to protect everyone. The woman said that she thought either her husband or Jason was involved. She again insisted that she watched with concern as more bruises appeared on the 3-year-old girl's body after her father brought her in. The defendant confirmed that Hannah had been complaining of headaches regularly for the past few weeks, and the woman believed that her father was to blame. The question then arose as to what had prevented her from reporting the incident to the appropriate authorities. Why weren't there cameras in the kindergarten? And why was it the father who was asking about the injuries in the correspondence? And Lindsay was just making excuses. All of this contradicted her story. The defendant added that she had been intimidated and coerced into confessing. The detectives had indeed used several tricks. For example, while Hannah was alive, they lied that the girl was dead to gauge the suspect's reaction. She attributed the anxious search queries to Jason. Allegedly, the child's father himself asked how to remove bruises, and she was only looking for information about this. The woman insisted that he was not using a child's seat and that he was driving aggressively. The lawyer played up these claims to advantage, as if the child could have been hit in the car on the way to daycare. The jury was convinced that the child was seriously injured and that the tightly pulled hood was used to hide the bruises on his face and head. The defense had a witness who could undermine the prosecution's tactics. He was a forensic expert who had already testified at controversial trials. According to him, the injury could have actually not manifested itself immediately, and Jason's indifference simply did not allow him to notice the girl's strange behavior in time. Because the child had spent a long time on life support, the extent and characteristics of the injuries could have changed, which would have distorted the autopsy results. However, all of this sounded like an assumption. Naturally, everyone was concerned about the motive. What could have made the woman mutilate the defenseless girl like that? According to the prosecutor, all this could be connected with Lindsay's emotional state. The fact is that a few weeks before Hannah's death, she suffered a miscarriage and was suffering. It is curious that around the same time, the girl began to develop the first bruises on her body. When Hannah clung to her father that fateful morning and refused to let him go to work, Lindsay was simply angry at the girl's behavior. Or perhaps it was because she was unhappy with the late payment for her services. As soon as Jason's car pulled out of the driveway, the woman attacked the child, hitting her multiple times in the head, possibly even picking her up and throwing her to the floor. Naturally, the defense had not yet given up. The defendant's attorney found out that Jason had a friend named Chris staying at his house for at least 12 hours before the child was taken to the hospital. Now they were referring to this man too, trying to make him the culprit of the tragedy. The prosecutor's office was seriously afraid that the jury would have reasonable doubts. The hearings lasted 2 weeks. Lindsay was found guilty of manslaughter. The teacher was sentenced to life in prison. She will be eligible for parole after 15 years. As soon as the news of the trial's outcome leaked to the media, local TV channels and newspapers exploded with ambiguous headlines. People continued to discuss what had happened to the child and the likelihood that her biological father was the real criminal. Could Lindsay have been covering for someone? Many people really believed that the nanny was innocent. Dear viewers, please support us by subscribing to our channel, hitting the like button, and sharing this video with others. Your support means the world to us.